Sometimes the smallest acts of hatred can teach you the most about building bridges in a community. I'm Officer Jett Reynolds, badge number 2847, 15 years with the Prairie City Police Force here in Nebraska. Started as a patrol officer, worked my way up through narcotics, and now I'm a K-9 handler specializing in drug interdiction. My partner Rex and I have seen our share of cases, but this one still sits with me differently than the rest. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when the call came through dispatch. Code 594 vandalism at the First Baptist Church on Maple Street. Nothing unusual there. Prairie View sees its fair share of property damage calls, especially around the downtown corridor, where 3 different congregations share the same block. What made this different was the nature of the damage, and what it would eventually teach our entire department about community policing. I was finishing up paperwork from a routine traffic stop when Sergeant Blake Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. Unit 247, respond to 1247 Maple Street for vandalism report. Pastor requesting immediate response. Unit 247 en route, I responded, checking my watch. 0847 hours. Rex stirred in the back of my patrol unit, sensing we were about to move. My German Shepherd partner had been with me for 3 years, and he could read my body language better than most humans. The drive to First Baptist took maybe 4 minutes through Prairie View's quiet residential streets. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where we typically saw hate crimes or religious targeting. Prairie View prided itself on being a community where different faiths coexisted peacefully. The Baptist Church sat between Temple Beth Shalom and the Islamic Center of Prairie View, arrangement that had worked without incident for over a decade. As I pulled into the church parking lot, I could see Pastor Williams standing near the front entrance with his arms crossed. Even from a distance, his body language told me this wasn't just broken windows or spray paint. Something about his posture suggested this cut deeper. The morning sun cast long shadows across the church steps, and I noticed several members of the congregation had gathered despite the early hour. Word travels fast in a tight-knit community like ours. I grabbed my incident report clipboard and approached the pastor, Rex walking calmly at my side. Morning, Pastor Williams. I'm Officer Reynolds. Understand you've had some vandalism overnight? Pastor Williams nodded grimly and gestured toward the church's main entrance. Officer, I've been serving this congregation for 12 years. Never seen anything quite like this. As we walked toward the front of the building, I began to understand what he meant. The vandalism wasn't what I expected. Instead of the usual profanity or gang tags, someone had painted religious symbols across the church's brick facade. A Star of David. A crescent moon and star. A cross. But they weren't defaced or mocking. They were painted with surprising care and detail. This happened sometime between midnight and 6 this morning, Pastor Williams explained, running his hand through his graying hair. Mrs. Chen from across the street called me around 6:30 when she saw it during her morning walk. I pulled out my digital camera and began documenting the scene, following standard evidence collection protocol. Each symbol measured roughly 2 feet in diameter, painted in what appeared to be high-quality exterior paint. The work showed artistic skill, not the hasty scrawl of typical vandalism. Any idea who might have done this? I asked, taking measurements and noting the precise locations in my report. That's what's puzzling me, Officer Reynolds. These symbols, they're not hateful. They're actually quite beautiful. But it's still vandalism of church property. Rex sniffed around the base of the building, his trained nose searching for any scent trails. His behavior remained calm. No indication of drugs or explosives, just routine investigation mode. As I continued photographing the scene, Rabbi Sarah Goldstein from Temple Beth Shalom approached from across the street. She'd obviously seen the commotion and come to investigate. Pastor Williams, is everything all right? She asked, then stopped short when she saw the painted symbols. Her expression shifted from concern to something closer to wonder. Rabbi Goldstein, this is Officer Reynolds. Pastor Williams said, someone painted these symbols on our building overnight. Rabbi Goldstein studied the Star of David painted near the church's main entrance. The craftsmanship is remarkable. This isn't vandalism in the traditional sense. Before I could respond, Imam Hassan Patel from the Islamic Center joined our growing group. Word was definitely spreading through the interfaith community. I received a call about vandalism, Imam Patel said, then paused when he saw the crescent moon and star painted with obvious care and respect. This is unexpected. I found myself in an unusual position. Technically, this was criminal mischief, painting on someone else's property without permission. but the religious leaders seemed more intrigued than angry. The symbols weren't defaced or mocking. If anything, they appeared to be celebrating the diversity of faith in our neighborhood. I need to process this as a vandalism report, I explained to the gathering group, but I'm also curious about your perspectives on what we're seeing here. Pastor Williams nodded thoughtfully. Officer, I've been thinking about this since I first saw it. Yes, it's our property. But these symbols, they represent our neighbors, our friends. My radio crackled with routine traffic, other units handling morning calls throughout Prairie View. I acknowledged dispatch and continued my investigation, but something about this scene felt different from typical property crimes. Has there been any tension between the religious communities recently? I asked, following standard investigative protocol. Quite the opposite, Rabbi Goldstein replied. We've been planning an interfaith dialogue series for months, all three congregations working together. Imam Patel nodded in agreement. We've had nothing but positive interactions. Our children play together, our families know each other. I was documenting witness statements when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the other buildings. I showed the message to the religious leaders. Anyone recognize this number? They shook their heads, but Rabbi Goldstein looked thoughtful. Officer, maybe we should walk over to our buildings. The short walk to Temple Beth Shalom revealed similar artwork. A cross and crescent moon, painted with the same careful attention to detail. At the Islamic Center, we found a Star of David and cross, equally well executed. Someone painted symbols of the other faiths on each building, I observed, updating my notes. This was no random act of vandalism. This was deliberate, planned, and carried a message. My training kicked in as I considered the possibilities. Hate crime? Unlikely, given the respectful nature of the artwork. Gang activity? No territorial markings or threatening language. Juvenile prank? The skill level suggested otherwise. I need to call this in to my supervisor, I told the group. This is beyond typical vandalism protocol. Sergeant Morrison arrived within 10 minutes, his experienced eyes taking in the scene quickly. He'd been with Prairie View PD for 15 years and had seen his share of unusual cases. Reynolds, walk me through what we have, he said, pulling out his own notepad. I briefed him on the timeline, the witness statements, and the pattern across all three religious buildings. Sergeant Morrison listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The artwork quality bothers me, he said finally. This took time, planning, and skill. Someone wanted to make a statement. As we discussed next steps, a young woman approached hesitantly from the direction of the church parking lot. She appeared to be in her early 20s, carrying what looked like art supplies. Excuse me, she said quietly. I think I need to talk to you. The religious leaders and I turned toward her. She had paint stains on her fingers and looked like she hadn't slept. I'm Chen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I painted those symbols. The moment stretched as everyone processed her confession. Here was our vandal, a young artist who had just admitted to defacing 3 religious buildings. But her demeanor suggested this wasn't a simple case of criminal mischief. Miss Chen, I need to inform you of your rights, I began, following proper procedure even as questions swirled in my mind. Wait, Pastor Williams interjected gently. Officer, before we proceed, could we hear why? I looked at Sergeant Morrison, who nodded slightly. Sometimes the best police work meant listening before acting. Chen took a shaky breath. My grandmother lives across from the church. She's been watching the news, seeing all the hatred between different religions around the country. She's been so worried about our neighborhood, about whether the peace here would last. She gestured toward the painted symbols. I wanted to show her that our faiths are connected, that we can celebrate each other instead of fearing each other. The religious leaders exchanged glances. Rabbi Goldstein stepped forward first. Maya, what you did was beautiful in intention, but you damaged our property without permission. I know, Maya said, tears starting to form. I'll pay for the cleanup. I wanted to do something positive. Standing there in the morning sun, surrounded by 3 religious leaders and a young artist who had broken the law with the best of intentions, I realized this case would require more than standard police procedure. This was about community, faith, and finding justice that served everyone involved. That moment taught me that sometimes the most important police work happens when you put down the citation book and pick up understanding. The next hour unfolded unlike any arrest I'd made in my 8 years with Prairie View PD. Instead of handcuffs and a patrol car, we found ourselves in Pastor Williams' office, discussing restorative justice with 3 religious leaders and one very nervous young artist. Maya, I said, pulling out my incident report pad. Legally, you've committed criminal mischief in the 3rd degree. That's a misdemeanor, carrying potential fines and community service. She nodded, accepting responsibility without excuse. Her grandmother had raised her right, even if her methods were unconventional. Imam Hassan leaned forward. Officer Reynolds, in our faith, we believe in mercy balanced with accountability. What if Maya could make amends through service rather than punishment? Rabbi Goldstein adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. The symbols she painted, they're actually quite beautiful. She clearly researched our traditions. Pastor Williams smiled. What if we turn this into something positive for the whole community? I found myself in uncharted territory. Standard procedure called for arrest, booking, and letting the courts decide. But these weren't standard circumstances. The community leaders were offering an alternative that could serve justice better than jail time. Let me contact my supervisor, I said, stepping outside to radio Sergeant Morrison. Unit 247 to dispatch. Patch me through to Sergeant Morrison. Go ahead, Reynolds. I explained the situation, the community leader's proposal, and Maya's willingness to make restitution. Morrison listened without interruption. Reynolds, this sounds like a perfect case for our community court program. Bring everyone down to the station. We'll document everything properly and explore alternatives to traditional prosecution. Back inside, I addressed the group. We're going to try something different. Maya, you'll still be formally charged, but we're exploring restorative justice options. The drive to the station gave me time to think. Maya rode in my passenger seat, not the back like most suspects. She'd waived her right to remain silent, wanting to explain her actions fully. My grandmother came here from Taiwan 40 years ago, she said as we drove through downtown Prairie View. She always talks about how different religions coexisted in her neighborhood there. She's been so worried about the division she sees on the news. So you decided to paint unity symbols? I spent weeks researching. The Christian fish, the Star of David, the Islamic crescent. They all have connections to Abraham's faith tradition. I wanted to show how they're linked, not separate. At the station, Captain Rodriguez joined our unusual conference. Maya's case file grew thicker as we documented her confession, photographed the paint on her hands, and recorded statements from all 3 religious leaders. Ms. Chen, Captain Rodriguez said, your intentions were admirable, but your methods were illegal. However, these gentlemen have proposed something interesting. Pastor Williams outlined their plan. Maya would create a legitimate interfaith mural on a community center wall, with proper permits and community input. She'd also complete 40 hours of community service at each religious institution. Additionally, Rabbi Goldstein added, we'd like her to help organize an interfaith dialogue series. Turn her research into education. Maya's eyes widened. You trust me with that after what I did? Imam Hassan smiled. Maya, you've shown us that young people in our community care about unity. That's exactly what we need. The paperwork took 3 hours. We processed Maya through the system, but instead of booking her into county jail, we enrolled her in Prairie View's Community Accountability Program. She'd still have a court date, but with community support and a clear path toward making amends. As the religious leaders prepared to leave, Pastor Williams pulled me aside. Officer Reynolds, thank you for listening today. Too often, law enforcement and faith communities operate in separate spheres. You've shown us they don't have to. That evening, I filed my report with unusual satisfaction. Case cleared by alternative resolution. Community strengthened rather than divided. One young artist redirected from the criminal justice system into community service. But the real impact came 3 weeks later. Maya's interfaith mural dedication drew over 200 community members. Local news covered the story, highlighting how Prairie View had turned vandalism into unity. Standing in the crowd, watching Maya explain her artwork to children from all 3 congregations, I understood something fundamental about police work. Sometimes the best arrests are the ones you don't make. Sometimes justice looks like second chances and community healing. Sergeant Morrison found me in the crowd. Reynolds, that was good police work. You saw beyond the crime to the person and the community need. Maya's grandmother approached me as the ceremony ended. In broken English, she thanked me for giving her granddaughter a chance to make things right. Her weathered hands gripped mine as she spoke about watching the neighborhood come together. That case changed how I approached community policing. Every call became an opportunity to build bridges, not just enforce laws. Chen taught me that sometimes the most powerful police tool isn't a badge or handcuffs. It's the wisdom to recognize when healing serves justice better than punishment. The Interfaith Dialogue series Maya helped organize continued for years, becoming a model for other communities. Her mural still stands today, a permanent reminder that understanding can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. 23 years have passed since that October morning when I first walked into Prairie View's Sacred Heart Church. Today, I'm Chief Reynolds, but the lessons from that vandalism case still guide every decision I make. The Interfaith Dialogue program Maya helped create became a cornerstone of our community policing strategy. What started as damage control for church vandalism evolved into monthly gatherings that bring together people from every corner of Prairie View. We've prevented countless conflicts simply by fostering understanding before problems arise. Chen graduated from art school and returned to Prairie View as our community liaison coordinator. Her office walls display photos from dozens of collaborative projects, murals, cultural festivals, youth mentorship programs. The scared teenager I met that day became one of our most effective crime prevention tools. Last month, I attended the dedication of Prairie View's new Community Justice Center. The building houses our Restorative Justice Program, victim services, and mediation resources. Above the entrance hangs a smaller version of Maya's original interfaith mural, now considered a local landmark. During the ceremony, I spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Pastor Williams, now retired but still active in community outreach. Imam Hassan, whose mosque has become a model for interfaith cooperation. Rabbi Goldman's successor, who continues the tradition of opening synagogue doors for community meetings. Sergeant Morrison, now Assistant Chief Morrison, introduced me to speak. As I looked out at the diverse crowd, I thought about how many officers never get to see the long-term impact of their decisions. We respond to calls, file reports, move on to the next emergency. But sometimes, if we're fortunate, we witness the ripple effects of choosing compassion over convenience. The Community Justice Center processes over 300 cases annually through alternative resolution. Young people who might have entered the criminal justice system instead find mentorship, community service opportunities, and second chances. Property crimes drop consistently as neighborhoods strengthen their social bonds. Maya approached me after my speech, now a confident woman with paint-stained fingers and a warm smile. She thanked me again for that October morning, for seeing potential instead of just problems. Chief Reynolds, you changed my life by believing I could make things right. But she had it backward. That moment showed me the power of compassion in law enforcement. Maya and her community taught me that true police work isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about understanding people, building trust, and recognizing that justice sometimes looks like healing rather than punishment. Walking home through Prairie View's tree-lined streets, I passed the original mural. Faded but still vibrant, it depicts hands of different colors reaching toward a shared sun. Children play nearby while their parents chat across cultural lines that once seemed insurmountable. Tomorrow I'll respond to new calls, face fresh challenges, make difficult decisions. But I'll carry forward the wisdom gained from a scared teenager who taught an experienced cop that sometimes the most powerful tool in our arsenal is simply listening. Some calls you never forget, but they make you who you are.